Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Oral Island podcast. I know it's been a very, very long time since I've done one of these, but I am back. I'm trying to make a little something out of this, and I thought a really good idea and a nice idea for a podcast would be a little mini sort of how to win series. So to kick things off, I thought a great idea would be to do a how to win six mans because of course that is something that has been fairly popular in our server for the last while, and I thought, who would be a better guest than the one and only Redeyes, the six man's season three Premier Champion, and let's not forget he went 9-0 that season, so it was a spectacular season from him. So, Redeyes, thank you very, very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me back on the infamous Dave Forehead podcast.
Well, yeah, no, it's good, and you've been here before, so this should be a breeze. Um, let's get straight into it. When it comes to six mans, obviously the start of the season is, I think, one of the more interesting times of the season. There's new sort of lineups in the divisions, new people, and generally just a fresh and interesting dynamic to it. So, I guess first question off the bat is what are your thoughts going into the season? Do you feel optimistic? Do you set yourself any targets? That kind of thing.
I personally don't set myself any targets. I try to take it one game at a time. I sort of look at everyone who's in there, and I sort of try and think of like, here's all the teams I'd like to play with. Here's all the teams I think I would struggle, and just try to go from there. Take it a game at a time.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. The classic, Premier League manager way of dealing with things, one game at a time. Another thing then is just in a broad perspective, when you see everyone else in the same division as yourself, do you ever try and judge your competition? Do you pick out someone who you think might be the same level as you and pick out a rival? Because I have to admit, I actually do this myself a little bit. I pick out someone who I reckon is about the same skill level as me, and I try and see, can I keep up with them in the league table and all this kind of stuff. So I wonder, from yourself, from a champion's perspective, is that something you do as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially with it being the third season of our six mans, it's very easy to look at the former champions and go like, okay, watch out for them because they've obviously got what it takes to win it. So a game against them is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very, very good point, actually. And then, again, start of the season, it's something that people may consider doing is, or even in the like quote unquote off season, they may consider preparing and practicing for six months. Do you think that's really like a thing that's possible, or is it too kind of wild and unpredictable to really prepare for that?
I think you could probably play a few games of solo standard to really get a little bit of a feel of what it's going to be like. I think that's as close as it gets to six months. Um, Other than that, though, there's no real way you can prepare for, you only have an hour before the match actually starts of who you're going to team with, so it's impossible to really prepare.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point, and I have to admit it's something I do myself. Is I do play a little bit of solo standard and try and have some, grasp on playing with different people and this kind of thing. You said there about obviously the teams generally come out like an hour before the match. Do you ever try and use that hour to your advantage and maybe study your other team, look at who's there, think about their weaknesses, or do you just kind of roll with the flow?
I'll definitely look at it. That's the most interesting part before the game. I'll just sort of mentally take note of, right, that's what they're good at. That's what they're good at. Do I think they would mix well? Okay, no. Okay, yes. All right, they're a good team. Um, yeah, I wouldn't say it really affects my mindset going into it, but I definitely take little mental notes of just, all right, that's what they're good at. Watch out for that.
Yeah, that's a very very point. I think a lot of people would be along the same lines there. Moving on just a little bit then, the first game of the season. There generally is a fair bit of hype around this. People do like to get back into the swing of things. Um, do you ever treat that game any differently? Do you there sweating it out, staring at Discord, waiting for that message to come up, or do you kind of relax, take it easy, and see how it goes? Try and treat it, as if it was any other game.
Personally, for me, the first game of the season is just as important as the last game of the season, so I don't really treat it any differently. It's the same as any other game.
Yeah, well, that's very, very fair. That's a very calm, measured approach to things. One thing though that I personally find quite exciting about the first game or the first couple of games of the season is the newer players in the division. How do they play? How do they stack up against everyone else? Obviously, you've been in Premier the entire time, so you've never had people drop down to your division. People only going upwards. But Do you ever sort of have a little mental note of how they're doing?
Oh yeah, of course. But I also try to keep in mind that it's one best of three series, or sorry, best of five series. That happens a couple of times a week, so you're not going to see the same player every series. You know, someone could have a bad day, someone could have a good day, someone could pop off, someone could just not show up. You know, I don't think there's any point in looking at how they played and thinking, okay, that's them as a player, because they could play totally differently the next series.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, and I think people will take the first game or two that someone plays a bit too seriously sometimes, and I think they like to assume that that's how they'll be for the rest of the season, and we see this a couple of times where people completely prove that wrong. So I think it's a very fair point that not everyone will play the same each game, and potentially you could say that's an issue with different teammates. Some people click together better. Would you say?
Oh yeah, of course. There's I'll say, take for example in the Premier Division, you put Fisher and Mug in a team, and there's going to be a lot more coordination there than any other two players in the season or in Premier Division, just because they have team experience and stuff. So really, the third man in their team just needs to be able to pick up the slack of what those two would be doing.
Yeah, I mean that's a very fair point. Anyone who's used to each other will obviously have that benefit. Moving on a little bit, then we're sort of middle of the season ish. Do you ever pay much attention to the league table? You're kind of thinking, right, if I win this next game, if I win my next two games, I'll be right up there. Or do you? I mean, as you said earlier, do you just take it game at a time and try not to pay any attention to that whatsoever?
I will always look at the stats after the game. I'll never look at it before. I think looking at it before can get you into the wrong mindset. Like if you're having a rough season, looking at your stats beforehand can put you into a state of thinking you're already going to lose. Or if you're really far ahead, you can look at it and be like, I don't need to worry about this game. I'm 10 games ahead of the next person or something. So have the game first, then check your stats out later. That's what I would say.
I think that's actually some really good advice there, because I can totally relate to that. Where I'll check the table before I start, and then suddenly I have that little extra bit of anxiety and nervousness going. Okay, now I actually need to win this because blah 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 will be ahead of me if I don't. Whatever. I think that's actually a really good thing to take away. Check the stats afterwards. Speaking of the individual stats themselves, the classic goals per game, saves per game, all this kind of stuff. Do you pay much attention to that kind of thing, or are you not too bothered by it?
Personally, I'm not too bothered by it. It's always nice to look at it and see your name with the bright green coloring to indicate that you're doing really well in that regard. But I just don't try to focus on it too much, because if your playstyle is working, then and you look at a stat and you're like, okay, my goals aren't very good, so maybe I should be more aggressive. And then suddenly you could find yourself not playing so well after that. Just play what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I guess if it's working for you, then that's the thing. Could you maybe say though that if it's not going so well for you and you're looking towards the end of the table, could you say that maybe your stats are a good way to have some logical reasoning as to why you're not doing so well?
I think it can help point you in the right direction, but I don't think you should go off it entirely, because your teammates are going to be a big part of that as well. Because you could play with two defensive players one series, and then the next series play with two very aggressive players, and your stats are gonna fluctuate with that. So it can be a good mainly toward the end of the season when everything's sort of starting to average out. It could be a bit more useful, but I wouldn't say they're the be all and end all.
Sure, that's a very fair point. And then I guess maybe a little bit of a redundant question here, but do you ever pay attention to other people's stats? I mean, I assume you check your own ones out every now and again, but do you ever look at someone else and go, "Oh, geez, they're really banging in the goals" or whatever?
Um, other than just for my own personal interest, just to see how everyone's doing. That's the only real time I would ever really look at it. But I don't look at it and being like, "Oh, that guy's ahead of me on goals. I gotta beat him." It's like, if I'm top of the board and someone's got 10 more goals than me, then they must be doing something else wrong, or I'm doing something else right.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. I think if you're seeing very extreme differences, then maybe it's worth checking out. But I would definitely be a believer in stats at the be all and end all. So I can totally agree with that. That in general, it's not a main thing to worry about. Um, I guess then another question, something you might think about throughout the season is when the teams come out. I know you said there that you might sort of try and briefly consider what your opponents might do, do you ever play? Do you ever try and play with the team that you've been given beforehand? I mean, I know it's a rare enough case that that would be a possibility, but is that something you look out for, or do you kind of just let it go and show up on time for the game?
Usually just let it go, show up in time for the game. I don't think many people really would play with their team together because the whole point of this is, we're all playing in a big mixed bag of people who we wouldn't normally play with, so that's part of the fun. It's just great to go into a series together and not have that practice, and just see how it goes. See who mixes and blends together and stuff. Of course, there's the odd time that you get a team with people that you would play with normally, like there's a series recently this season with me, Blah, and Walshy on a team, like we're playing threes all the time together anyway, so in
Yeah,
that case, we had a wee bit of practice beforehand, so.
yeah, no, I mean that's a fair point. I think many people wouldn't even sort of look for the opportunity, so it's kind of fair enough to say that. I suppose a slightly different question to that then is, do you warm up in a particular kind of way before a six man? Is there anything different or unique you do, or do you just do a standard warm up with maybe a couple of your favorite training packs or whatever?
Now one thing I did last season that I haven't done this season or any of the seasons before was I would just go and do. I'm sure you're familiar with doing a little bit of slow mo training. Where you
Oh
like
yeah,
a private game, slow mo, and all that. And I did that like 90% of the games I would have, or before 90% of the games I would have played, like just a quick 5 minute slow mo game. Just I don't know, just helped, I guess. Nothing else though,
see,
really, apart from just a bit of free play.
you say it helped, but the other two seasons you didn't win it. So my next
But I
was
wasn't doing it.
was it holding you back?
Was what holding me back? Sorry.
The slow mo. You said that you did it in season 1 and 2, right? And then you
No, I
didn't.
didn't do it in season one or
Oh,
two.
sorry.
I
Oh,
did it
so
in I
so
did it in season three.
is actually the key to your success. That's what you're saying to me.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
that's
with
the
you.
one thing I did differently in
I'm with you.
season three.
Right. Okay. That's a very interesting because I have heard of that being a thing that people do, but never really paid much attention. So maybe I'll have to rethink some of the stuff there. Interesting. Um, if you're not in the game, unluckily because you wanted to queue, but it was full beforehand or whatever else. Do you ever try and watch the stream of that match in your division? Assuming there's one there, is it good? Do you think to watch the other guys play from a different perspective and whatever else, and kind of see how things are going on?
Yeah, I always try to watch it. Like, if for whatever reason the queue popped before I could queue, or if I couldn't play and then suddenly I was around but still the queue popped or something, I'll always try to watch a stream or something because it's just interesting, really. It is good to see how everyone plays from a different perspective, especially when you can see everything that's going on and why you can sort of look closer into why people do certain decisions. Because you've got that free cam, you can see everything's going on. So I think that's more so it's just fun. There's all these players you're used to playing against, and it's just fun to sit back, no worries, and just watch a game.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's a good point too. I mean, it's the whole point of six months is to be enjoyable. So yeah, absolutely, it's good to hear things like that. Another thing then is obviously six months is a league. It's 6 weeks long typically. Do you think momentum can be a big deal? Do you think if someone's on a roll, gets a couple of wins in a row, you think, right, I want that person on my team for certain because they're gonna pull something out. They've been playing well recently, so hopefully they can do it again. Is that something that ever goes through your head?
Um, no, I wouldn't say so. Just with the series all taking part on different days, I think that just resets the momentum completely every time. So I wouldn't say there's too much on momentum when it comes to 6 months.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a very fair point that especially I would think because you're playing with different teammates every time as well. That would also have an effect on the quote unquote on momentum. Um, so yeah, no, that's a fair point. I personally do find that if I lose a game or two in a row, it can get to me a little, but um, I can see what you're saying at the same time that new days, everything's a little bit different. Um, one thing then you would definitely know this being a champion of it and doing pretty well in one other season. When you start to get higher up the table, do you feel any kind of pressure that you're doing well? Like I know you said you don't check stats beforehand, and that does sound like a good idea, but you can't help but know that you're there and that you are in the running at some point, or you are in a top three spot or whatever. Do you ever start to feel that bit of pressure that things are going well and you want to keep it going?
I'll be honest. The only time I've ever felt pressure in 6 months was when I had already won season 3. Like it was just a thing of like you've won this and you cannot lose it no matter what you do.
Uh-huh.
And I got asked to queue for the last 2 series, I think it was. And I was going flawless at this point, and I really wanted that flawless season, to be the first one to have one. And that was the main time I was nervous, to be honest.
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah, that is funny. Well, I mean, you came out with it unscathed, so you can always take pride in that. But that is, I find that hilarious. That is the only time you feel pressure. That is brilliant. Um, I guess then how how do you do it in a way? Do you what is your thought process? What are your thoughts on the 6 months as a whole that allow you to feel so relaxed? Do you think is it you as a person, or is it more that the league format is kind of easy-ish going, or like what kind of things allow you to think like that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who really do feel the pressure and get upset or annoyed with themselves when things aren't going so great, and we have seen a couple times it leads to people dropping out too, which is not great. So what would you say to anyone who's kind of in that situation?
I First and foremost, you should just see Six Mans as a fun, like, alternative to a kind of solo standerish kind of mode where everyone's kind of on an equal playing field. Um, so that's how I first visualized Six Mans when the concept of it first came up. So I was just like, all right, this is gonna be a fun way to just play some Six Mans with friends and stuff. So I'm not seeing it as a competition or a league or that. I'm just seeing it as all right, bunch of guys want to queue and we'll all get a big game together and we'll have a best of 5 series and we'll see who wins. So that would be why I sort of go into them, as well as it's just myself. I don't really get that sort of worried about games anymore. Um, Used to, like, definitely used to. I think everyone goes through a stage when like every game of anything can get to you if you're really invested. Like back in the day when I would have played Call of Duty and stuff, I would have got nervous about games then and stuff. Um, but I don't know, just I guess as I got older, just the pressure of that kind of thing doesn't really get to you anymore. I imagine like if I was in a situation where I was playing an RLCS or some shit, then I would definitely get really nervous then. But that's totally different situation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair point. I think well said. I think some people could take a page two out of that book definitely, because that is I think that's one of the key things. One, to both enjoying anything really is to not take it too seriously, and two, to actually doing well is, I think a lot of people would find they play their best when they're relaxed and so on and so forth. Um, in terms of not so mindset so much, but what you actually do on the pitch in the game, how do you approach those games? Do you try and take charge straight away, make your presence known, that kind of thing, or do you like to sit back a little, see how your teammates want to play it and what kind of speed they can go with, and go from there?
I personally really like to just let my teammates do what they want to do, and then I'll adapt around them. I think in a mode where it's going to be unpredictable who you play with every time, that's the safest bet. You can go into a game and just try and play your game and see what happens, and sometimes that can work out for you. But there's sometimes your team just will not gel with that, and if someone on the other team knows how to shut you down even half the time, then you're going to be in a bad spot more times than not. So I think it's easier just let your teammates do their thing and pick up where they're sort of falling down.
Yeah, I think that's, personally, that would be my strategy too. But I have to say that if everyone did that, then it kind of doesn't work, because you don't really play. You just sort of hit the ball randomly. But I think in general, it's not a bad way to go, and keeping your teammates in mind at least, I think, is something that is crucial to 6 months. And then I guess another thing in terms of playstyle and stuff, assuming you know your opponents even kind of well, you know them to an extent, do you try and make plays that you know that they'll struggle with, or does that even really cross your mind when you're in the game?
I would say that really crossing my mind. I'm not really thinking about what they would struggle with specifically because in Premier, there really shouldn't be a situation where you can do this one thing and they're going to struggle with it every time, because everyone at that level should be fairly good at dealing with every situation. Maybe not perfectly every time, but should be somewhat competent at shutting down every play. Like there's a reason ceiling shots after they came out for like, or after they were popularized for like a week, everyone knew how to shut them down after that at a certain level. It's sort of the same in Premier, everyone just knows how to shut down certain things. So I think you should just play solid. Go for passing plays. Passing plays would be the big one, I guess. Just because they're good no matter what level you play at.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And back on sort of mentality, something I slightly forgot to ask. When you're playing, as a team, you're in the voice chat, all the rest of it. Do you yourself try to be a bit of a team captain, try and motivate the guys you're with, or generally is there sort of good enough vibes and energy you don't have to do that too much, or how do you handle that dynamic, I guess, of 6 months?
Well, I'm not really much of like a hype guy when it comes to, you know, we score a goal and we're all sitting there going like, yeah, let's go, guys. I'll be like, oh yeah, nice goal, really good. I'm mainly more on the side of like teammate whiffs the ball and ball goes into our net, and they're feeling pretty sorry for themselves. I'll try to pick them up after that. So it's like everyone does it. You're not the first person to whiff a ball in Rocket League, so no point getting upset over it. Happens. It's if it's gonna happen, it happening in a friendly 6 months game where the only thing on the line is a couple of stats on a spreadsheet. That's probably a good time for it to happen. So that's the way I would sort of look at it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'll ignore the making little of our 6 months league. Thank you very much. But the rest of it, no, I'm joking.
Listen, there's a bunch of these guys who they've got big ambitions, so it's a good way to make things seem less bad when they miss the ball.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, no. It's a very fair point. I think it's generally a good way to be. Um, you did mention though, like the stats sheet a little bit, and I do have to ask because sometimes this happens to me where I'm playing my games and whatever else, and maybe not literally during a game, but in between the little breaks between the games, when the stats come up and whatever else, you take a screenshot. I have to admit, I do have the slightest think about what stats did I get? Is that going to look good in terms of my record so far and all this kind of stuff? And for me in particular, my saves per game generally tend to be quite high, so I'm always keeping a small eye on those. And I guess I'm wondering from your point of view, do you ever check out that kind of stuff? Does it ever occur to you? Do you go for a shot and think, oh yes, if this goal goes in, I'm now going to be my record's going to be one better than it was before, or do you have a little sneak peek in between games, all that kind of thing? Is that something that you ever even think about?
Um, I wouldn't say me personally, no. But we do have a little joke in like Premier and stuff that you've already won your game or something. You're up 4-1 with like 30 seconds left. There's no way the other team can win. You're still trying to score as many goals as possible because gotta pad those
Yeah,
stats. Um, but other than that, maybe at the end of one game I'll look and like I have like I don't know 800 points or something, and I'll be like, oh, so that'll probably reflect quite nicely on the stat sheet after this. But other than that, like during a game, that's not something that crosses my mind at all.
yeah, that's totally fair enough. And I mean, yeah, I mean that no, that is definitely the right way to go about it. I just have to admit, I do. It does cross my mind the occasional time, but
Oh yeah,
yeah,
you wouldn't be the only one. Plenty of people in Premier do the same thing.
no, yeah, I'm sure it's not an uncommon thing, but it's something that I go, which is more important, winning or my stats? And then obviously winning should be the correct answer. But yeah, moving on then, end of the season. It's all juicy. You've won all this kind of stuff. Let's take just this season for the moment. Did you obviously you said you got your 9-0 and you were delighted about that. Did you look back at any point to think, "Oh, that game was probably the closest out of them"? Was there a moment where you'd gone sort of? I'm not saying you could have done better, obviously, but is there any? Do you find yourself that you have highlights, I guess, at the end of the season?
Um, Apart from a few random shots that I would have hit during the season, that I would have thought like, oh yeah, that was a really good shot. Glad I hit that, or oh, that really mattered in that game. Maybe wouldn't have won that game without that. Don't think about it too much, except for in season 3 there was this one game where it was me, Lovely Cans, and Walshy. I think it was Mug, Demox, and Panda we were up against, and
Okay.
we were down 2-0. And I remember we came back to win that with a reverse sweep and two, maybe three overtimes along the way.
Wow.
I don't know if you've seen that one, but that was a particular highlight of season 3 because toward like midway through that last, or midway through game 3, where if they had won, they would have won that series. I remember thinking like, I can just feel that, Cans and Walshy might have given up here, and then suddenly a goal went in for us, and you could just feel that kind of momentum sort of shift, and then it just sort of kept building from there and there. And especially with Cans, like, he's probably one of the hypest people you can ever play with, especially in a series like that. He was screaming down the mic. It was great. So that was that was probably the highlight series of all of 6 months for me, to be honest.
Yeah, brilliant. And then I guess in the other seasons, obviously we had the one poor season in the middle. We'll not talk about too much, but in general, those other seasons, did you find yourself looking back at any particular moments, or again was it all kind of blurred into one a little bit? I guess.
Well, season 3 is obviously going to hold special place because of that flawless season.
Yeah. Do you want to say
season
that one more time? Do you
2,
want to say that one more time? What type of season did you have in season 3?
Flawless season.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Flawless. Season 2, that's a bump in the road. I keep looking back. I'm not trying to figure out what went wrong, and I honestly can't, because I feel like I played fine, but I don't know. Obviously the points didn't reflect that. And then season 1, I occasionally think about how I probably could have won that, but I remember at the time. Remember how I said earlier, I went into 6-mans just thinking, right, there's going to be a bunch of friendly 6-mans games with the free friends, and it's going to be good fun. And I hadn't really looked at the rules, to be honest, and I didn't realize it was based on an average score system.
Yes.
I was apparently quite a few points ahead, but I just kept playing, lost a couple of games after that, and then suddenly I was like third. And I remember looking at the board after that being like, wait, what? This isn't just number of games played? And I was like, oh no. Well, I guess I've lost this season then.
Yes, I do remember that. I was quite unfortunate at the time. I think I remember the exact message when it clicked as well, which was painful. But we're all over that now. I think at this point, I think you've more than redeemed yourself. I think that's about it. Then I've asked all my questions. I've said my piece. Is there anything else you'd like to say on 6-mans? Anything maybe I didn't ask, or any extra thoughts, advice for anyone in the lower divisions?
Advice-wise, just don't take it too seriously. Have fun with it, and if you find yourself at the top of the board, then great. Keep it up. Keep up what you're doing. But other than that, I would just say that it's actually fantastic that we even have a server that could put this sort of thing on. Like, the fact that I'm sitting here doing a podcast talking about the 6-mans is, I can't think of any other Discord I know that could do that sort of thing. So I think people should appreciate 6-mans before, because I remember there was some talk about maybe not getting the numbers for it a certain season, and people don't realize that this sort of thing is actually quite hard to put on, especially when you got so many people in divisions. So it's great that we can even have this.
Yeah, thanks. I have to say that means a lot, and I'm sure Enrong, if he's listening to it, will appreciate that too, because he obviously kickstarted the whole thing. Yeah, no, I mean, you are right. I won't get into it too much, but you're right. It does take effort. There's a reason we have specific 6-month mods and all the rest. So yeah, we put on a show. We hope people enjoy it and just go from there. Anyways, I think that's about it. We're all done for this round of podcasting anyways. So Redeyes, Season 3 Grand Champion with his Grand Champion? 6-man Season 3 All-Round Champion with his flawless...
Flawless.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, there's got to be a way we can incorporate that into the server. We can't do like if emotes had a noise, I'd want that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But we'll work on that. We'll think of something. Yes. Thank you very, very much, Redeyes, for coming on with this one for me.
Yep. Thanks very much for having me.
Not a problem. Always a pleasure. We'll leave it there. Thank you very, very much to you guys listening in, and hopefully you'll hear from me soon. Bye bye.